Good evening, CIS. Hey. uh, Despite T3, it is really great to see so many faces in the room. Really a testament to our today's topic, grit and resilience. For those of you to whom I've not been able to say hello in person, I'm Athiya Habib and I co-head the CISPITA Speaker Event Committee. There are no courses in the college and the university for parenting. No tutors, no manuals. No standard testing, and certainly no grading. All of us elect to be a parent of our own free will. We fall in love with these little creatures at first sight, and then frantically go and upskill ourselves to be the best parent in the world. But we are fortunate to have access to a lot of academic research, behavioral modeling, and experts such as our speaker for tonight, Anne Bridgewater, who are there to share with us the good practices as well as best techniques, and more importantly, make us aware of our own blind spots. So this leads me very nicely into an introduction for Anne. Anne has been a practicing therapist specializing in pediatrics for the last 15 years. She works extensively with children and young adults as a clinical psychologist, and she has worked across hospitals, private clinics, and school environments such as CIS. She is indeed not a stranger to a school like CIS. And just now, she's told me she's just done a TEDx talk last week. So this is going to be obviously a walk in the park for her today. So tonight, Anne is going to focus on a very important subject, how to develop grit and resilience in our children. The format for the evening is very simple. We'll have Anne for about an hour or so, then followed by Q&A. And then after that, we've got some more information for you about some more workshops on parenting, especially the stress management. So without further ado, Anne.
Thank you. Thanks, Athiya. Thank you very much. Okay, it's great to be here. Thanks for coming out in this weather. Can I just have a show of hands how many primary parents I'm speaking to? Wow, okay, and how many secondary? Wow, oh, okay, so a good split. Some of you have both, I think. Okay. Right, so I'll try and rush through this, not too quickly, but we have a lot of stuff to cover because very typical CIS style, I asked Michelle, okay, so there's positive parenting, and there's grit, and there's resilience, and then there's all this other stuff. What do you want? She said, everything. Right, so we've got an hour, so we'll try and whiz through it. So the initial part, I will be just giving you a bit of background on the information. I think many of you are very knowledgeable parents. You already know a lot of this stuff. And then following that, I think what parents like a lot of is more strategies and practical stuff. So we'll go through that as well. So there's a ton of terminology out there, and I'm sure your team here is phenomenal. Your team who takes care of health and wellness here are phenomenal. They cover a lot of these topics with the children and with you as a parenting group. Positive parenting, mindfulness, gratitude, flow, all these terms, and we'll have a look at what they all mean and how they all tie together. What it means for you and your child on a day-to-day basis, right? So you want your child to be happy, okay? I think is that the main thing? I always ask parenting groups whenever I go and speak anywhere, what is it you want for your child? Right? Is it prosperity? Is it wealth? Is it fame? Is it fortune? Is it good grades? Is it a great job? Is it a good degree? And most of the time, people put their hands up for happiness, right? So it's happiness we want, and we want resilience, because we all know that resilience, grit, happiness, and well-being, that leads to a very well-rounded and a very healthy individual, and that's what we want for our kids. And so all the other things that we talk about, such as positive parenting, mindfulness, gratitude, growth mindset, which I think is very big here at CIS as well, and being optimistic, these are all ways and methods that we use in order to get there, right? So stop me at any time, actually, if there's I know there's Q&A at the end, but if there's something that's like, oh my gosh, you know, I really need to know more about that now, let me know. So we'll start with positive psychology. So what is positive psychology? It's not just about being positive about everything and wow, everything's great. Positive psychology was started by Martin Seligman, and what he decided to work on was, you know, we're so used to using the medical model. And, you know, when you go to a doctor, it's what's wrong with you, right? You've got a cough, you've got a cold, you've got a fever. What hurts? Whereas positive psychology is, it's not about what's wrong with you, it's about how good you can be, right? Why should we limit ourselves to just being free of illness or free of ailment or free of mental health problems? We should be as good as we could possibly get, and I think that's what we want for our kids as well. We want them to be as happy as they possibly can be. So what he did was he explored a lot. He's done a lot of research about how we find happiness and how we make choices in order to allow ourselves to be happy, right? And I know CIS talks a lot about this as well, the PERMA model, right? So what it is he's come up with his PERMA model, which means this is what you really need in order to, in his words, flourish. Okay, so you need to have positive emotions, and that is, you know, just a feel good, you know, like a 6-year-old getting a bag of candy, or you going out for a massage. That just feels good. But that's not all happiness is about, right? Because that's not, if you just went out for a massage and that made you feel good in the moment, but does that make you truly, truly, truly happy? And according to him, that doesn't. So you need more than just that, right? What you need is you need to be engaged. You need to be doing things that you really feel matter to you and that you really enjoy. And those things can't be too challenging and they can't be too easy. If they're too easy, you get bored very easily. If they're too challenging, it causes anxiety, right? So he talks about, another psychologist talks about this state called flow, which is in between these two. Right? So you have to be engaged and really enjoy what you're doing. The third one is positive relationships. So you have to create and maintain positive relationships. If you just wanted to be happy for yourself, and you were just purely, you know, selfishly happy, which is the P, the positive emotion, you probably wouldn't, you know, want to take your kids on holiday or or go home every night early from work and work through their homework with them, because it's not much fun. But why do we do it? Because in the end, we derive great happiness from it, because we have this wonderful relationship and this positive relationship that we're creating and maintaining with our kids. And then M is meaning, right? What is meaning? Meaning is that you have to be part of something bigger than yourself, right? So this is fantastic. This is a very good example, the CIS community. You feel that you're part of something that's bigger than yourself, because if it's just you, it's not strong enough to keep you going, right? It has to have more meaning. And then accomplishment, right? So you have to have realistic goals, and you have to have ways to get to those realistic goals. So according to Martin Seligman, this PERMA model is what keeps us what makes us very happy if we are able to achieve all these things in life. Now, resilience. What's resilience? Resilience is the concept that we can never protect our children from everything. Okay, that's just not possible. Okay, they're going to come across really bad events in their life, adverse events that are going to set them back. But the most important thing is that they have the competence, the problem-solving skills, the autonomy, and the sense of purpose in order to get through those events. Right? You look at anybody successful, they've been through really, really hard times. Right? But why are they successful? Because they had resilience and they were able to bounce back. And that is, and then, that's what resilience is, right? That this is going to pass. This is what I thought of when I had to do my TEDx talk. This is going to pass. It's going to be over in 24 hours. I'll survive it. It's okay. Right, so that's resilience. Now, the next one is grit, and you've all heard of grit, right? Angela Lee Duckworth. I'm sure you've all heard her. You've watched her TED talk. Grit is more than resilience, right? And the reason why grit is more than resilience is that she talks about deep commitment. Okay, so you have to be resilient. So you have to be able to bounce back. You have to have those skills that make you mentally strong and persevere. But you also have to have a deep commitment to something that you really, really love and that you want to keep doing for years and years and years. And that's what she calls grit. So that's the difference between all those things, right? Carol Dweck, you've heard of, and she talks about the growth mindset, right? And that is the concept that intelligence is something that can grow, that your mind is a muscle that you have to work out. And the more you work out, the stronger your mind will get. And this is such an important lesson to teach our kids because it means that when they fail something, when they get a, what do you guys get? You do the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for your grades? Yeah, when they get a 1 in something, it doesn't mean they'll get a 1 forever. Right? If you have a fixed mindset, when you get a 1, you give up and you never work at that subject ever again. But if you have a growth mindset and you get a 1, you think, wow, I can get better at this and I can improve, right? So a growth mindset is extremely important. I'm really whizzing through these terms, so you can catch me at the end if you think, oh, I didn't get that. So the next one I'm going to talk about is mindfulness. Now, mindfulness comes from very ancient Buddhist teachings, and it's about being mindful and conscious of this moment, right? If you closed your eyes, if all of you close your eyes right now, and I ask you what color the ceiling is, could you tell me? You could? The people nodding were very mindful when they walked into this room, right? So, you know, when I talk to my kids, they go, oh, I don't want to do mindfulness. It's sitting there doing breathing and listening to gongs, and they get really bored. I said, no, that's not mindfulness. Mindfulness is, what color's the carpet? What did you smell? What did you see when you walked in? What was in the cupboards before you walked in here? It's being mindful of everything around you. And the research has shown is when you're mindful of everything around you, you don't spend half the time worrying about stuff, right? Because you're in the present moment. When you're not mindful, what happens is that your mind wanders. And the research has shown that when your mind wanders, chances are you're thinking about something bad. And you're thinking about something that's going to make you unhappy, and you're thinking about something that you're going to worry about, that you're going to not be able to do anything about anyway. Right? So you might as well be in the moment, because if you really are in the moment, like right now, you're okay. You're feeling okay. You're sitting here. You're comfortable. You've got a roof over your head. You're not outside in the rain. You're actually okay. And so that's the concept behind mindfulness. It's so great for our kids to be able to get this when they're young. And And it's great, you know, we have a lot of kids who have difficulty with attention now, and mindfulness is one of the best practices you could work with kids who have attention difficulties. Okay. I've got too many devices going on at the same time. Positive parenting. What is positive parenting? Positive parenting is using parenting in a really positive way and not using punishment. Okay? Now, I work with a lot of parents every single day, and they say to me, oh, I'm so positive to the kids. And then they say things like, well, I told him that he couldn't have his iPad if he didn't finish his homework. And there, right there, is something that's not positive, right? You can tell him exactly the same thing, but you can say it in a positive way, which is, hey, when you finish your homework, you can have your iPad. And that's positive, right? So it's a very subtle difference, but it makes a huge difference to a child, because when they're hearing, oh, you can't have this until you have that, oh, you can't, it becomes very negative, and it's almost like a threat, and that's not positive parenting. Right? So positive parenting is fantastic. I'm so into it because it's my number one tool. I work with so many parents and so many children, and if I can get them to parent positively, I get such massive changes that it beats every other tool and every other strategy I have. What it is it improves social and emotional satisfaction, it improves happiness, you get a better behaved child, you get better emotional regulation, you have enhanced mental health, you have enhanced academic performance and learning, you have improved physical health, and you have improved attention. That's what the research shows that positive parenting does. Okay, so without further ado, let's move on to the core, the strategies. So what Atiya said just now that, I can't remember what you said. You said that you weren't going to test them. That's not true. I'm going to test you guys. I'm going to give you I'm going to show you what it's like for the kids. So what I've done is I've done a CIS parent tally sheet. Okay, so you can give yourself your own report card as we go through these strategies. It's not, nobody's going to check. I'm not going to ask at the end what score you got, but I thought it would be nice. I've used your IB reporting criteria, which is one of them needs work, one of them is satisfactory, and the other one's exemplary. So you can rate yourselves on all these skills, all these strategies as we go through them. And really, this is not me. You know, if you need a pencil, put your hand up, because I know people don't carry writing instruments with them any longer. So as I go through these, I'm going to ask you a question at the end of them, if I remember. I hope I do. And you can rate yourself. You can see if you're doing this with your child. And this is really just for you guys, just to see, okay, I can do that a little bit better, or I'm really good at that, I'm okay with that, just to give ourselves a bit of a reminder as I'm going through it. Yeah? So we'll tick them off as we go along, just to keep you guys awake. Okay, let's get going. So I am going to list about 20 odd of the top strategies for developing grit, resilience, happiness, and success in your kids, okay? And we're going to just go through them, bam, bam, bam. So the first one is an amazing relationship with one adult, okay? It doesn't have to be a parent. Most often it is. You don't necessarily need lots of adults. You need one, research has shown you need one great positive relationship. A lot of children who don't come from great homes have that one positive mentor or one positive teacher that they can really relate to, and that makes a huge difference in their lives. So what a child needs is someone that they can really identify with, someone who listens to them and who they feel safe with. And what I mean by listen is, very often children come to us and they say, oh my gosh, I don't know, what do your kids say to you? My kids will say, oh, I'm so scared, I've got a math test tomorrow, oh my gosh. Do your kids say stuff like that? Or are they much younger? What do they say? I want to make something that's applicable to you. Like, they probably say, what do they say? What do your kids worry about? Friends. Oh my gosh, so-and-so was so mean to me. He hates me. He's never going to speak to me. Oh, she's never going to speak to me again. They all hate me, and they're not talking to me, and they're so mean to me. And what do we say to them? We say, oh, don't be silly, right? Is that what we say? We say, oh, don't be silly. Don't be silly. That's okay. They'll be fine. You'll be fine tomorrow. They'll be nice to you tomorrow. And what that does is that doesn't acknowledge the child's feeling. Okay? So the best way to respond when they're feeling anxious about stuff is to show them that you hear them. That's all I do in my office, and then they get a lot better. So you don't need to send them to people like me. You could just do it yourself, which is just saying, wow, it sounds like you're really worried about your friends not talking to you. Wow, you know what? That would make me really scared too. What can we do about it to make it better for you? Or how can I help you? Or, wow, that sounds really scary. You're really brave to go to school tomorrow, but I know you're going to be okay. Right? To repeat back to them sometimes what they've said. Wow, you've got a math test tomorrow? That sounds so hard. I would be really scared if I had a math test tomorrow too. But it's okay, we can study together. Okay, so it's really hearing what they say and not just saying, I mean, you know, it's when someone says, when you have a real concern and you're really worried about it and someone just says, oh, don't worry about it, forget about it. It's kind of annoying, you know. It's like when my husband does that to me, I'm like, no, I'm really worried about it. You got to listen to me. So that's what our kids feel like as well. The second thing is to maintain communication with them, especially as they're going between primary up into secondary. Because if you lose it, you're not going to get it back. By the end of secondary, it's going to be really, really hard. So you just got to keep, and if you keep listening to them, if they feel that they're heard, they will keep talking to you. But if you keep dismissing them when they talk to you, they're not going to want to talk to you anymore. They're just going to talk to their friends, because their friends will listen. And you've got to, that adult has to hold high but realistic expectations for them. So you've got to have expectations, but they've got to be realistic. So that's number one. So if you feel you listen to your child on a regular basis and you give them positive feedback about their anxieties and you maintain communication, you can give yourself an exemplary. Okay, the second one is that children, oh, sorry, by the way, as we're going through the slides, everything that's in blue, I've tried to sort of relate back to the concepts that I talked about in the beginning, the grit, the resilience, the positive psychology, the mindfulness, by highlighting everything that relates to those concepts in blue, just to show you how that matches back to that. So children learn social emotional competence by watching parents and by watching the people around them. So in order for your child to learn social emotional competence, which is probably the most important skill they'll ever have to learn, you have got to model it really, really well. So if you have a disagreement with someone and you slam the door and you walk away from it, that's what your child's going to learn. And that's how they are going to resolve grievances with you in about 2 or 3 years' time. Right? So if you want them to understand what it means to talk through and to understand other people's point of view and understand other people's perspectives, is you've got to model that. Is it funny? Oh, Oh no, no checking the person next to you. Just look at your own grading. So this is so important to keep modeling this social. And I'm not saying it's, it's not necessarily a husband-wife relationship. It's how you relate to your mother, how you relate to your mother-in-law, how you relate to your father, how you relate to your helper, how you relate to someone in someone in a restaurant, how you relate to someone at a hotel concierge. The kids are watching this all the time, right? So give yourself a mark for how you model social emotional competency. Okay. The third point that really helps kids handle difficult situations is using positive self-talk. Okay? Positive self-talk is to reframe negative situations and to focus on the positives. 9 out of 10 kids I work with have a very, very, very negative mindset. Okay, so everything that happens to them, they think of the worst case scenario that could possibly happen, right? So, for example, they lose their lunchbox at school. It's just, oh my gosh, I've lost my lunchbox. My mom's going to kill me. I'm never going to find it again. Everything inside, it's going to go moldy, and there's going to be worms, and it's going to be disgusting. It's going to smell when I get it back. So everything is very negative, right? And what they've got to learn is how to reframe that, right? Which is what we do a lot of work with. You can use lots of different ways to describe this. We talk to kids about helpful thoughts and unhelpful thoughts. We talk to kids about green thoughts and red thoughts. And so you reframe it so that it's positive. I lost my lunchbox today. How do you say that? And how do you think about that positively? That's okay. I'll look for it tomorrow. I can go to Lost and Found. I'll find it again. It's not a big problem. I have another one at home. Mummy can help me find it. My friends can help me find it. So really thinking about things in a positive way. Right? So it's things like, and the way they learn this is again by modeling and listening to what you guys are saying. So for example, if you get stuck in a traffic jam and you're like, oh my gosh, we're so late. Oh my gosh, we'll never get there on time. It's terrible. It's terrible traffic. Why did I have to come this way? I should have gone the other way. You could have come down 5 minutes earlier. Why are you so late? Now everybody's going to be late. This is terrible. That's kind of negative. But whereas, okay, we're stuck in a traffic jam. What can we do now? Let's have a game. Well, let's listen to some music. Well, thank goodness I don't need to pee. It's thinking of what is the silver lining in the situation at that time. And kids learn this through listening to you. Okay, so if you're one of these people that say, oh my gosh, I lost my keys, I'm so stupid. Why did I do that? I can't find them anywhere. Then they learn to think in that way. But whereas if you're a positive person and you always think of the good point, they will learn to think that way too. So you've got to really teach your kids to reframe and focus on the positives. Okay, give yourself a mark for that one. Are you a negative person, or are you pretty positive about stuff? Okay, this is finding their passion. Okay? Every child has to find something they absolutely love to do, whatever it is. Okay? And as parents, I know, they're doing this, they're doing that, they're doing piano, violin, choir, fencing, all these things. It's really good when they get to the age about 9, 10 years old, or 11, that they really start focusing in on something that they can be really, really good at and really, really love. Okay? I know you can't read the small print there, but it's Steve Jobs. And he says, you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. And you know the 10,000 hours that Malcolm Gladwell talks about. In order to get 10,000 hours, you've got to be so passionate and you've got to love what you do so much. And the bottom bit of that quote says, I'm convinced that about half of what separates the successful entrepreneurs from non-successful ones is pure perseverance. And in order to get perseverance, you've got to really love what you do, right? And this is where Angela Lee Duckworth's grit comes in, because it's more than just resilience. You've got to have this passion for what you do, because you've got to have the commitment. Okay, so give yourself a point or rate yourself on how supportive or how well you've done, finding your child's area of passion and really encouraging it. This is what Martin Seligman talked about, having meaning, belonging to something bigger than themselves, right? So being part of a team, being part of a school community, being part of, this is what, many years ago when there weren't that many activities, a lot of kids did, Girl Guides, Brownies, Scouts. This is what this is all about. Being part of a big team that's bigger than themselves. It can be religious. This is why so many people find so much meaning in church, because you're part of something bigger than yourself, right? So does your child belong to something that's bigger than themselves? And do they feel attached and committed to that thing? Okay, physical health is really important, okay? Now, you've got to have a healthy lifestyle, you've got to have good eating, sleeping, exercise, and this is an average at least 9.5. I mean, for the primary kids, you're having more than this, over 10 hours of sleep. But even all the way up to secondary, you should be trying to get about 9.5 hours of sleep. I work with a lot of kids who don't get enough sleep, and it's a problem because they're doing homework till so late. They're very stressed when they go to bed. They don't turn off their devices at night. They get woken up constantly through the night. They have caffeine late in the day. So things you can be thinking about as they get older is building in these good habits of turning off devices early, not napping. A lot of children now are so exhausted that they nap on the school bus or in the car on the way home, and then they don't get to bed till really late, and their whole circadian rhythm gets messed up. And the other thing that's really bad actually is sleeping in on weekends. We tend to think, Friday, Saturday night, let them stay up a bit later. What happens is Friday night, they stay up a bit later. They wake up later on Saturday, which means that they go to bed even later on Saturday night, which means they get up really late on Sunday morning. They can't sleep on Sunday night, and they're basically a mess by Monday morning, and they have to get up early for school. So sleeping in on weekends or having late nights at weekends is actually really not a good idea, and actually sticking to their schedule as much as possible is the best thing you could do. Physical exercise is brilliant. All children need physical exercise. And I know that kids are busy. They're going to school all day, then they're in activities, then they're in tutoring, then they've got homework, and they're just sitting there the whole time. My kids, when they get home, they basically need about an area of about 2 square feet. They don't move from that area because as long as they have their computer and everything there, they just stay in that position. So it's really important that you make sure that at least one of their activities, and something that they like and something that they have friends doing as well, is something that's physical. Okay, this is a little bit more on exercise. And how it helps with your mental ability. This is a study that they did, and they found that after moving and after having some movement, it really stimulates your brain, right? And I'll talk about that a little bit more as it relates to study habits later on. But it's really important that the kids keep moving and they have exercise. And you know what? Exercise is the best. It's the best defense against having mental health difficulties as well, and anxiety and depression. The sense of engagement that we talked about earlier on is children get from volunteering and feeling that they are doing good for other people, right? A lot of parents come to me and they say they don't have a lot of self-confidence. Their children don't have a lot of self-confidence. To gain self-confidence, you have to feel that you're important to other people. And you do that by doing volunteer activities. And the research behind doing volunteer activities is phenomenal. It's showing that it increases self-esteem, self-worth, it improves physical and mental health. And the best way to do volunteer activities is not to send your child and outsource them to do volunteer activities with some organization, but it's actually to do it with them. Because again, the modeling is so important. If they see you doing it, they will be more engaged in doing it, right? So sorry, I've forgotten to ask you to tick yourself for the last couple. If you go back and give yourself your marks for those. This one's very, very interesting. Social connections. Maintaining friendships is the strongest protective factor against a whole bunch of stuff. All the stuff on the right, I know you can't see it, but increased longevity, stronger immunity, lower rates of anxiety and depression, physically feeling well, emotional regulation, self-esteem, empathy. If you have low social connection, you are at a higher risk for health difficulties than if you smoke or if you have high blood pressure or obesity. So if you don't have friends, it's more of a health risk than smoking, right? So that's really, really important. Yeah, all the things on the bottom. If you don't have friends, you have slower recovery from disease, you have antisocial behavior and violence, you're more likely to be anxious and depressed. So friends are so important. So I think we really have to think about this when, especially the secondary parents, when we limit our children to their social networking. I know that social networking, I know that, we have to put some cap on it, and I will talk about that in a minute. It's really important to limit it, but it's also important to recognize how vital it is for them, especially when they are adolescents, to have that connection to their peers. Okay, it's just the way that society has gone, and we find it very strange that that's how they communicate. The fact that they're in the same room and they're still texting each other or WhatsApping each other or Snapchatting each other. But that's how the new generation is, and we've got to be very careful how much of a lid we put on that, because we could be jeopardizing their social relationships. This is a wonderful quote. I'll read it anyway. I know you can read, but I'll read it. If I wanted to predict your happiness, and I could only know one thing about you, more than your gender, religion, health, or income, it's your social network. Okay, your family and your friends and the strength of those bonds. That's what's going to predict your happiness. So give yourself a tick for how well you nurture relationships and how well you encourage your kids to stay in touch with their friends and to actually go out with their friends on weekends and to meet up with their friends, how welcoming you are to for their friends to come around to your house, how much you help them organize activities with their friends. It's so important. Okay, this one's a great one, expressing gratitude. Have you guys heard of this? Yeah? It's fantastic. The research has shown that if you express gratitude for 21 days in a row, it shows up on an MRI. It changes your brain. Okay? So what you've got, what is expressing gratitude? It's just saying every day what I'm grateful for. I think this is where prayer came from, right? Because what are you doing when you pray every day? You know, you're just saying thank you. So we do this with a lot of our parents and a lot of our kids. I went into a school the other day, not this one, another international school in Hong Kong, and the teacher was actually doing it with the kids, and I thought that was fantastic. She was making them write a gratitude journal every day, and she said they had to hit 21 days. And what it is it's just saying, I'm really thankful today for whatever. We've come to the point where in our monthly meetings at work, at the end, we do a gratitude circle, and everybody has to go around saying what you're grateful for. It can be anything, you know. I'm grateful for the T3 today. I'm grateful for anything. It can be something very small, but it's a great thing to do at the dinner table or before bed when you're saying goodnight to them. Do a bit of a gratitude. Okay, explicitly labeling positive behavior. This is a big part of the positive parenting thing. So what we tend to do a lot of is to tell our children what not to do. And parents always say, "Oh my gosh, I've told him 100 times not to hit his sister." Right? I said, "Okay, great. Well, you know, after you've told him about 3 times, I think he knows it's not the right thing to do." So what we forget is that these are kids, and if we don't explicitly tell them what they should be doing, they actually find it very hard to problem solve it. So rather than saying, "Don't hit your sister, don't hit your sister, don't hit your sister," maybe you could say, "You know, I can tell you're finding your sister a little bit frustrating. What should we do in this situation?" Or, you know, when your sister's bothering you, why don't you come and find me? Or when your sister's bothering you, why don't you tell her to stop? And actually giving them suggestions explicitly for what they should be doing in those situations. And explicitly labeling positive behavior. I think most of you know this. Is you can't just say to a child, "Good job, well done." Right? That doesn't mean anything. You've got to say, "Thanks for doing your homework so quickly. Thank you for coming to the table when I asked you to." You've really got to explicitly label exactly what it is they've done well. Because when you say, "Well done, good job," you know, "good boy, good girl," it just goes way over their head and they have no idea what exactly it is that you want them to do next time. Right? So it's, "Thank you so much for tidying up today. Thanks for hanging your towel up so nicely. Thanks for brushing your teeth so quickly when I asked you to. Thanks for doing it when I had to only ask you one time." So really explicitly labeling what it is they've done well. And based on Carol Dweck's work, again, praising the effort and not the outcome, right? So the big thing that Carol Dweck talks about with the growth mindset, if you focus on the outcome, which is the grades, then they are more likely to develop a fixed mindset, because all they focus on is the actual outcome, the grades. Whereas, you know what? If your child gets a 3, but they worked really, really hard at that subject that term, and they just had a lousy day on the test, or they were sick on the test and they didn't do well, that's okay. They worked really hard, and you should be praising the effort. It's so much more important than the actual final grade. If they went into a dictation and they worked really, really hard, but it just so happened that they were, you know, that the dictation words were something that they didn't know or they didn't know would come up, that doesn't matter. They should still get praised for the hard work that they did going into that. So give yourself a mark on explicitly praising positive behavior. Allow for failure. I had to get Bruce Lee in there. So it says, "Don't fear failure." Allow for failure and disappointment, right? So if you're seeing them making a really bad decision and you really want to go and save them and say, "No, no, no, don't do that, don't do that." Take a step back and think, you know what? If I let them do it, will they learn a good lesson? Right? And I have a lot of kids who are really, really afraid of failure. They would rather not do something than get it wrong, I have a lot of kids who don't like guessing, who, you know, unless they know, and they get very, very stressed out if they have to guess. It's because they're so afraid of failure, because they're not used to it, right? So what we do a lot of is we celebrate mistakes. You know, you can say, what mistake did you make today? Oh my gosh, I made this really silly mistake. But you know what? It's great, because I'm never going to make that mistake again. Okay, so it's talking about mistakes in a really positive way. Again, I went into another classroom last week in another school, and a teacher was doing this with their kids. They had to come in the morning and write a sentence about mistakes and what was great about mistakes. And the kids came up with some fantastic sentences. You know, it's like, mistakes are great because that's how I learn. Mistakes help my brain grow, and all these things. So it's really good to talk about mistakes and talk about failures as being really positive experiences for them. Benefits of mindfulness. I talked about this earlier. Mindfulness is so powerful, and it's really. Does anybody do mindfulness with their kids? No, a few people. Okay, it is a hard concept for some kids to get their head around, but this is really good. Dan Siegel has an amazing book. He has a few amazing books. Really, really, I really highly recommend them. He teaches it in such an easy and child-friendly way. He talks about the wheel, and he teaches the child that the center of the wheel is your hub. And at any one time, you're in the hub, but at any one time, you can be thinking about different thoughts, you can be having different feelings, you can be having different body sensations, you can be anywhere on this sort of rim, but it's your choice to come back to your own hub and to focus in on your hub. And it's a really nice visual for kids, and they get it really well. You know, you can tell them it's your choice to focus on tomorrow's test and get all hung up about it. It's your choice to focus on your fight that you had with your friend this afternoon. But you can also make the choice to focus right now on now and how you feel. Right? So it's a really nice visual. And if you haven't read his books, they're amazing. I really highly recommend them. This one's really important, is to walk away and don't argue. I heard a guy say one time, don't argue with a teenager. Because you know why? It's like wrestling with a pig in mud. You both get dirty, but the pig has a really good time. They love it, right? Their main purpose in life is to engage you in an argument. Because that's what that's what sets their brain alight. They love it. They love every moment of an engaging argument, because only when you are arguing with them do they have your full attention, right? And they will do anything to keep that argument going, even if what they are saying is totally ridiculous. So the best thing to do when a teenager gets in that frame of mind is to be the adult and just walk away. Because it's really not worth it. Because then you just go on this massive downward spiral, and then everybody gets really upset. Because they will keep going and going. So that's something to be very, very mindful of. And give yourself a tick for how well you walk away from arguments. You know, it's teaching your child to learn it's okay to agree to disagree. Right? Have realistic expectations. Okay. My children go to a school where the expectations are very high. The children here have very high expectations put on them as well. So be really realistic about it. Okay? Understand your child's own strengths and weaknesses, and use their strengths to help their weaknesses, right? A lot of parents tend to look at their child's strengths and weaknesses and then hone in on the weaknesses. We've just got to do more of the weaknesses to get them as good as the strengths. But that doesn't make sense, because everybody's good at something and everybody's not so good at something. There will always be a gap between their strengths and their weaknesses. And your child will be so much happier if you focus on their strengths and make those even stronger. And the other thing is to be aware of the huge discrepancy that we have in our expectations for our children. I don't know if you could see what that is. That's a pile of dirty laundry on the floor. Right, so I think our children are expected to behave and intellectually function at an extremely high level, especially those doing IB right now. The curriculum is just mind-boggling. It's just so difficult, and the expectations are so high. But at the same time, it's very easy to let slide the other expectations in life, which are, all the things, taking care of yourself, packing your school bag, putting your dirty laundry in the laundry basket, tidying up after yourself, putting your dishes, washing your dishes. I know it sounds really mundane, but when you have these massive discrepancies, children find it very, very hard to consolidate. And they don't really understand where they stand, where they are, and why certain things are so important and other things aren't so important, and certain things the expectations are so high and other things aren't. So it's good to have that balance, and it's good to remember that balance. Okay, the use of devices. Who has difficulty with this? Yeah, I just did a whole series with First Code Academy, because they work with a lot of parents who have difficulties putting limits on devices. It's really important to model your use of a device. Okay, if this is what happens at the dining table, and if the parent is on the device all the time, you can't expect to tell your child to get off the device. I've seen so many parents holding a device and being on the device and at the same time telling the child to get off their device. Right? It doesn't work like that. If you want the child to get off their device and to eat a meal without a device, everybody's got to put their device away. Right? And it's the parent's job. We work with a lot of parents who say, oh my gosh, I'm so fed up. He's just on his device all the time. He won't get off it. But the point is that it's like putting a child in a candy shop and not telling them how much they can have and how, where they've got to stop. They will just keep going. And it's not fair to do that to them. As a parent, you've got to put limits on that. I know we've got a huge range of ages here, but for those of you who haven't handed over that device yet, I strongly recommend, have you seen that contract that mother wrote for her son, the iPhone? Has anybody seen that? If you Google it, it's in the Huffington Post, and it's titled something like "Mother's Contract with Her 4-year-old son on the iPhone." I think she gave him an iPhone for Christmas, and it's so fantastically written, and I highly recommend that everybody uses it. And if you've already handed over your device, find a way to get it back and reinstate this contract, because it's great. It talks about, this is a device, it's a tool I'm giving to you to use. It is mine, it belongs to me. You have the right to use it if you use it responsibly. And it's very, very well written. I highly recommend you look at it. The other thing, the other number one tip is never, ever, ever, ever let them have their device in the bedroom. And especially teenagers as they get older, because it really disrupts their sleep. And then you have you know, both big devices and small devices, because girls will end up going on social media all night long, and boys will end up gaming all night long. So try as hard as you can to put those limits and boundaries in as early as possible. And I know you guys have the one-on-one laptop scheme, right? Try and get them to do their work in the living room and not in the bedroom where you can see their screens. And just make it a rule. And you've got to make the space and make it possible for them to do that. This one is very similar. It's really still putting those, even though our children are maturing and they seem very adult, they still need to look towards us for guidance and for limits and boundaries. Children love it when we put in boundaries. Let me just get this link up for you guys. This is a really nice interactive. This is blue. This is why we must be the parent and why we must put in limits and boundaries. Blue means mature. Okay, this is really interesting. If you go home, you can try it because it shows up all the different areas that are maturing at certain ages. It's very interesting. So your prefrontal cortex, which is here, is what takes care of your executive functioning. Right? And your executive functioning is the CEO of your body. It does all the higher level thinking. It controls your impulses, it controls your attention, it makes good decisions, it does good organization and management. It's all here. And it's that front area, if you can see it. Can you see it? The top bit of the brain. So this is at age 4. It's still all orange and red. And then it gets a bit, let me try and do this. And then you can go through it and you can see the different areas that are maturing. So it's getting a bit blue, but all the blue is still at the back, right? And it's still getting a bit blue, getting more, but still the front is lagging a bit. They're 14, they're 15, they're 16, and it's still going, right? And it goes all the way up until finally, at about 21, you've got a blue brain. So it takes a long time, and actually, I think it takes longer than this. I've read some research that actually that your executive functioning continues to mature until you're at least 25 years old. So, hold on, I've lost it now. So that's why you've got to keep putting the limits and boundaries in, and you've got to keep being the parent. Study habits. This is a good one. It's really good to get these study habits in early. Do your kids listen to music when they study? They all insist that they study better when they're listening to music. So, and you know what? That's fine. If some research shows that children will work better with music as long as it doesn't have lyrics. Because some research says that your brain can listen to music and not get distracted as long as they're not words, because then you can still think of the words that you're working on, and that just is background. But then again, I've also read some research that some kids, particularly kids with attention difficulties, funnily enough, they actually work better with words with music, with lyrics, music with lyrics. And so it depends on your child's own study habit, but it's good to develop good study habits early. Lots of water. 73% of your brain is water. There's some research that's come out right now. How long are lessons at CIS? Do you know? This is a test for parents. 50? 45, 50, 40 minutes? It should be about 45, 50 minutes a lesson. And there's a reason for that. Is because you can't possibly concentrate for anything longer than that. In fact, you concentrate for short spurts within that, but that's the amount of time you can possibly sit and do any one activity. So if your child is sitting there for 3 hours doing their homework, you're getting extremely diminished returns. Okay, and so the research has shown that about 50 minutes, 51, 2 minutes, you've got to get up and you've got to walk around for about 10, 15 minutes and then sit back down again. So you've got to make sure your kids are doing this. If they're sitting there non-stop for hours and hours on end, they're not getting good returns. They might as well just stop working. How are we doing? Okay. This is nice to do as a family, to have a bucket list. Okay? So get together this weekend, sit down with your family and come up with a bucket list. Everybody gets to name something that they want to do as a family. And you know what? Because this builds optimism. This builds something to look forward to. It builds a common goal for the family. And that's really, really nice to do. Okay, so this comes back to my initial question. What do we want for our kids? Good health, happiness, success, fortune, fame, academic excellence, what is it? And Charlie Brown asks Linus, what do you think you'd like to be when you grow up? And Linus says, outrageously happy. Isn't that great? That's what we want for our kids. And if you look at your scores, if you've got more than 6 or 7 exemplaries, then you're doing really, really well. Your kids are going to be happy, okay? If you haven't, you've got your work cut out for you. Okay, so why is it so important for our kids to be happy? Okay, because the predictor of success is not intelligence. Research shows it is not related to intelligence. It's more related to your resilience and your grit and your happiness. And all those things we've gone through tonight are the top things you need to be doing to develop grit and resilience in the kids. The predictor of happiness is not success or being rich or prosperous, but it's a positive outlook. And that goes back to one of the very first ones, the positive thinking. Can your kids reframe thoughts? Right? If they're Eeyore, do you know Eeyore? Eeyore will never be happy, right? You don't want your kids to be Eeyore. So, and the predictor of physical health is emotional health. Right? So it's just so important and it's so fundamental. And you didn't need me and Carol Dweck and Angela Lee Duckworth to say that. People have known this for centuries. Charles Darwin knew it, right? It's the resilient ones that do well. And Confucius knew it, right? So it's nothing new. It's not rocket science. If you're engaged in your job, you'll never have to work a day. This is passion, right? The second point he makes is resilience and not being afraid of failure. The third thing is growth mindset. It's just worded differently. Yes, we're done. Got through them all, and we're good for time. So, any questions? Happy to take questions. Yeah. There is a balance. You're right. There is a balance, and I think I hear what you're saying, and I think that's at the beginning when I talked about positive psychology. It's not about everything being wonderful, right? It's not about everything being positive. So there has to be natural consequences. But I think the point about being positive is that you have the skill to do that switch to a positive. You know the skills you need to do to make yourself feel better, right? The lunchbox was kind of like a flippant example, but it's when you're really stuck in a really bad place, can you put, and you need the practice on silly things like lunchboxes in order for you to have the skill to do it when you really are stuck in a bad place and not feeling great. But the other thing about the strengths and the weaknesses is, yes, we're not going to ignore their weaknesses completely and, okay, forget about it. You don't have to do maths for the rest of your life or algebra, right? No, you have to continue working on that. But you also can't forget to mention what they're good at as well. I think it's very easy to jump in, in the workplace. The research says that for every one criticism you give an employee or a colleague, you should give 5.6 positives in order to keep them motivated and happy. And that's for adults, right? So for kids, I think it's very easy for parents to just forget to acknowledge the positives and to just jump in and say, okay, don't chew with your mouth open, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, pick up your bag, don't leave your towel on the floor. It's very easy. And the thing about being positive is that when I've worked with it for so many years is when you do start focusing on the positive, it brings up the negatives as well. When you focus on the strengths, it brings up the weaknesses as well. Because focusing on the strengths builds motivation. Does that make sense? Or does that answer your question at all? You've got to have responsibility, right? You've got to have responsibility and you've got to have expectations. So you've got to, if you lose your phone, you lose something important, you've got to have natural consequences. You don't go out the next day and buy them another one, right? You've got to have those natural consequences. But at the same time, you've also got to, the thing about being positive about stuff is that the minute the parent is positive about stuff, the child becomes more motivated. When the child becomes more motivated, the parent becomes happier. When the parent becomes more happier, they become even more positive. Then the child becomes even more motivated to do stuff. Children love to please their parents. And very often, the reason they don't do things or they don't do things well is not because they're just being a little about it and not wanting to do it. It's because they really don't know how. And so when you are able to be positive, you can bring up their motivation. And very often, the things that they're not so good at, they become more motivated to perform well in those as well. That's what I found with the kids I've worked with. But no, you're right. You have to keep the natural consequences there as well and make them responsible for their actions. And that's where the limits and the boundaries and being the parent comes in, I think. Yeah.
I have a question. I agree with everything that you've been saying, and I do try to be positive in a whole bunch of things. I've got 3 children. My question is how, as parents, if we all agree as bringing out the positive, listening to all 3 children or 4 children, properly listening, not just hearing, that's important. Right. Finding somehow, almost magically, sometimes trying to find, saying positive things not about the 6 that they got, but how they got there. It takes so much patience and so much time. And meanwhile, they're bickering, and they haven't brushed their teeth, and they're 10 years old, and you're like, oh my God, how do you do it? How do you get that patience?
It takes a lot. It takes a lot of patience, but when you get into, if you really if you take this sheet and you go back and you target one thing a week, right, it becomes habit. That's what, when it becomes habit, it becomes easy. And I mean, I don't have 3 kids, hats off to you. And I know it's hard, it really is hard. But I mean, I'm not saying you have to, I mean, that's a lot. I think you're setting very high expectations for yourself as well. I think that you've got to have things in a routine. You've got to have your boundaries. You've got to have your limitations in. And you've got to just build this in when you can, right? And I'm sure you're doing all this already. It's just being more mindful about it. And not being so tough on yourself, because expecting to do all that and get their teeth brushed on time and get them to bed, it's hard. It is hard. But it does become easier. Once you really internalize it, it becomes much easier. Yeah.
About parents where they say, what kind of parent are you? And every single mum says, I'm okay at this, I'm okay at that, and God, I have no patience, and I get so frustrated, and it's driving me nuts. And then they interview the kids, and the kids are like, my mum, she's the best, she's fantastic, and not one of the kids mentions she's impatient. So I think it's the positive self-talk.
And it does come through, right? And it is hard, parents are always hard on themselves. But what was the first thing you said? That the mothers said. The
mothers were saying, I'm okay at this, I'm okay at that, but I'm just frustrated and I'm so impatient.
Yeah. So because something came to my head and I've lost it now. I'll try and remember what I was going to say.
Worth looking at.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I'll just mention really, it does take a lot of patience, but the other thing that really, really works is when you're about to lose it, take a deep breath. You know what? And you have to think, what are you modeling to your kids? Right? It works because I do this with parents every single day. And I tell them to stop and think about it. And you know what? How does losing patience help? How does shouting at your kids help anything? Right? It doesn't help. Because it ends up getting them upset and you get upset. And then everybody goes to bed angry. Right?
And just interested in your views on at what point in time parents should open up and start talking about their own mistakes that they've made in life and give a little bit more introspection and share that with children.
I think you start with the easy things. You start with the silly mistakes that you make. And you just make mistakes. You normalize mistakes. And it's just everybody makes mistakes on a daily basis. And it starts with very silly ones. And very easy ones. Not until they're, teenagers that, if you're talking about really serious, big life-changing mistakes, they're not going to be able to comprehend them until they're at least 13, 14 years old. Yeah.
Talking about the positive self-talk, I actually want to say about a different scenario about overconfident. A lot of children from international schools do have that tendency, and also you can see in the corporate when you interview people, a lot people have a lot overconfident, but when they practically work, they can't solve problems. So is that the thing? Is that a character that we need to do something about it when they're still young, or just let them have some mistakes and it will fade away? But what I'm just saying is it seems that overconfidence is becoming a scenario quite obvious lately, I think.
Okay. I guess I work with a completely different population. But again, the research shows that if you're overconfident, it's not going to damage your psychological health, right? It might lose you a few friends, right? But being definitely, if you're talking about psychological health and physical health and well-being, it is definitely more detrimental to not have enough confidence. And I think you were right. For the kids who are really confident, you just got to let them make their own decisions and make their own mistakes and learn from their own mistakes.
So you're suggesting that this is not something we should purposely doing something about it. You know, there's no point to do.
I don't see that there's any positive outcome in purposely damaging your child's confidence or self-esteem. You've got to be realistic with them, right? And that comes back to having realistic expectations of them. But I don't think it does anybody any good to damage their self-esteem or to purposely find ways to push down their self-confidence.
Okay, that's great. That's all I need to know.
You know what? And I think they get a lot of pressure from their peers, and they get a lot of pressure as they are going through school that will help them buffer their overconfidence. Yeah, it's not easy. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Anne, for the lovely presentation. Really wonderful material and lots of food for thought. Two things that stood out for me personally were how critical it is for us to let us make our children make mistakes. And secondly, how children use the behavior of parents in conflict as a model, and how we need to be careful and cognizant of that fact. Very interesting. So on that note, just a few thank yous. First of all, a big thank you to the organizers for the event, especially Michelle Lai, who is not here today with us, but who was instrumental in bringing Anne to CIS, and also the other speaker committee members like Patrice, Mimi, and Karen. Also the school counselors, Sue, Anne, and Monica, for working with us to bring this event to you. And last but not the least, the star of the evening. Thank you so much, Anne, for spending this time with us and sharing these strategies with us. A big round of applause for Anne, please. And here is a little something to remind you that you were with CIS tonight in T3. Just a few housekeeping things. First of all, the school has arranged for another parenting talk or for parents for year 11 and to 13 on 1st of November. And that's about the final countdown, the stress, and how to help your child overcome it. Secondly, towards the beginning of next year, in January and February, CISPITA, working alongside school, is bringing you 2 more intimate workshop-style events, again on positive parenting, and this time focusing on stress management. So please do look out for Moongate as well as your emails on that. And on that note, thank you everyone for coming, and have a good evening.